So probably more than a dozen of these guys have petitioned for an HD remake of Final Fantasy VII, but do you personally think it should be done, or would you rather people remember it, Final Fantasy VII, as it is?
So this interview with Final Fantasy creator Hironobu Sakaguchi, it had me on the edge of my seat. I needed to know his thoughts on an FF7 remake. Well, let's see what the man has to say.
I think both.
Oh.
And there you have it. The answer is both. It seems like not much is here. But listen to the cheering fans, not only here, but at the reaction to the official announcement.
You're going to love this. Trust me, what you're seeing now is my normal state.
Keep going! Is to go even further beyond!
Proud to announce that Final Fantasy VII Remake is coming first
He's
to
saying the date.
PlayStation 4.
Oh my god, dude! Oh my god!
I think it's safe to say, people were pretty excited for this game. These two reactions got me thinking about how conflicting the idea of a Final Fantasy VII Remake is. It's E3 2015. Square Enix presents a trailer that showcases a familiar sword on a slightly gaunt-looking blondie. It's Cloud frickin' Strife, y'all. It's finally happening. Final Fantasy VII Remake is announced. You cry, tell all your friends, look up fan art of your best girls and boys. You start digging back into the world and replaying the game and learning new things that you didn't appreciate when you were younger. It feels so good to be in the world of Gaia again. After being teased in 2005 with the PS3 tech demo that led nowhere for 10 years, it has been actually confirmed. I tell ya, Square Enix has been on a roller coaster ride in terms of development. In between Final Fantasy Versus 13 rebranding to Final Fantasy 15, and my personal favorite series, Kingdom Hearts finally returning to home consoles in glorious Unreal Engine HD in 2019. It had been insane seeing what was happening with Square Enix and the crazy development cycles. I became way more interested in the people that created the things that I love, namely Square Enix and Tetsuya Nomura, the director of the remake. After the release of Kingdom Hearts 3 in 2019, Nomura finally came out of his time travel research lab to let us all know Final Fantasy VII Remake was on the way. He wasn't lying. After its first and only delay, we finally had it. Final Fantasy VII Remake to play after 23 years from the initial release of the original in 1997. We finally got to see our favorite LEGO characters brought to life on April 10th, 2020, and it was incredible. First and foremost, I love this game. I cannot gush enough about how fun it is. Well, let's get into it. Now more than ever, Square Enix's priorities obviously fall into the visual fidelity department. Even with the original Final Fantasy VII, they took a huge risk by leaving Nintendo to work with Sony, who is offering the much more technically advanced PlayStation. They have a penchant for creating in-house game engines like Crystal Tools, which was used for Final Fantasy XIII. But when the development of their next-gen console engine, Luminos engine, say that 3 times fast, came a slew of issues like delaying Final Fantasy XV for over half of my lifetime. It really seems Square Enix's priorities were becoming more and more misplaced as Final Fantasy games take longer and longer to make. It's pretty much agreed upon in the critical community that mainline Final Fantasy games have been in sort of a slump after Final Fantasy X. In between the laundry list of issues stated earlier and Hironobu Sakaguchi, the producer and writer of the original Final Fantasy VII, had left the company, it was safe to say I became increasingly wary that this was going to be a dumpster fire. Boy, was I wrong. Square Enix slept on making this bad boy for a long time, and I think it was better for it. They sucked it up and announced the switch to an outsourced Unreal Engine 4 in lieu of their typical in-house Luminos. Old habits die hard because the company came in swinging. They were manufacturing sex gods more than ever. The updated graphics probably is the most visceral response I've experienced in a long time. The girls, beautiful. The guys, sexy. Marlene is just so goddamn adorable. The monsters are disgusting, battles flashy, and also, you can look at the pizza in the sky. Look at that. The craziest thing in the game is just seeing everything in motion that you had to imagine before. In the original, Tifa just places a drink in front of you. But in this one, there's this full-fledged cocktail mixing scene complete with a behind-the-back toss. Ugh, she's just a babe. Look at her go. She also makes 2 drinks with a single cocktail mixer. Truly a master bartender. They even lovingly recreate Cloud's weird little animations like this shrug and spinny sword victory pose. And they kind of hold off on making you think that it's not there because it would break the pacing to hold a pose after every battle. But they put it in later in the Coliseum, making it so much more cathartic when you do see it happen. Seeing Barrett pick up Marlene and how his eyes soften when he speaks to her really sells that he's literally the best dad in the world and that we need to kill Shinra to protect Marlene at all costs. I will always love the goofy original Lego Man aesthetic, but seeing everyone in motion with updated fashion and facial expressions, it's just so damn pleasing. They really hit the nail on blending together human looking models with an aesthetic that isn't too anime. Alright, I'll just say it. They honestly just look better than humans. Unrealistic expectations for men and women, and lab rat dog. The fashion sensibilities of Nomura to me have always been so sick. I'm pretty sure that's what helped me stay glued to Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts for my entire life. But the Italian flair of Roberto Ferrari is really what brings the heat to these character designs. I love the little belt around Aerith's sleeves and the bold accents that give it that motorcycle jacket look. Look at all these tactical belts that Barrett wears that look super sick in techwear fashion today. But also shows that he wears his items for utility as intended. It also brings his torso together reminiscent of his upside down Dorito shape in the original. Although they did give him and Rufus a bunch of them in typical Nomura fashion, but I'm a sucker for it. And then there's the 3 dresses that our leading ladies have. Aerith and Tifa look drop dead gorgeous, although I still don't understand how this Chun-Li outfit equates to athletic, but hey, she could still dolphin kick me any day. Cloud's 3 dresses are ridiculous, but at the same time so great. His most decked out one has him rocking a tiara and extensions. He walks so prim and proper and his face is nearly about to break down because his cool guy inside of him is dying. They even give him his own special animation for opening treasure chests. Work it, girl. Now, the main cast, they just look great. You could tell a lot of time and effort was put into making Cloud's hair just the perfect amount of spiky. Don Corneo's belly and hair sway the perfect amount to make you cringe every time he moves. When people were asking for jiggle physics, is this what they wanted? We really can't talk about jiggle physics without mentioning Tifa. Tifa Lockhart's design was probably one of the most controversial aspects of the remake among fans. In the original, she had giant honkers. Comically so sometimes. It has always been quite a heated debate whether she should have large breasts or not. What's the big deal with just reducing it, you might ask? Well, to that, I say, why should we? Well-endowed women exist in the world, so why shouldn't they be represented in games? A lot of people preach that there needs to be more diverse characters in games. Why should athletic women with huge tits be excluded? Nomura revealed in an interview with Famitsu that her design was going to be changed due to Square's ethics department having requested to restrict her chest. Nomura decided to have her wear a sports bra so her tits wouldn't be flopping around all crazy like, as she's a literal martial artist and does crazy flips and kicks and shit. So this wouldn't be a huge problem for me, but literally weeks after the reveal of her design at E3 2019, they showed off her design for her inclusion in their fighting game, Final Fantasy Dissidia NT, and it's exactly the same as her original design. Where's the ethics department now? Anyway, I hate her sports bra and her stupid thigh highs, but I can confirm that she is not nerfed. So she's pretty alright, but could someone please get this woman a shower?
Would kill for a shower.
Let's take a look at the environments and NPCs. For the most part, the environments look pretty good. The best part is that this game has a 3D camera. The original has this top-down view that would cause the sense of scale to be lost. The church was a tiny little house when you see the characters on top of it. Now it dwarfs Cloud and Aerith, its beauty surviving the test of time. Wall Market originally certainly was a dingy hellhole, but now it's sprawling with club glowers and is illuminated by dozens of Japanese neon signs. You literally walk through alleys to find guys doing a drug deal. It's just so dense and easy to get lost in. But Don Corneo's giant gold mansion still poses as an eyesore in the sea of grimy dark blues. It's also interesting that you could find topsiders like Palmer, a Shinra executive, bumming around down here with the rest of us. Really goes to show all walks of life come down here to let loose. Speaking of topsiders, I would catch myself stopping to walk and just point the camera upwards just to see the underside of the top plate that was always visible from wherever you were. Always reminding its citizens of the structure of the presence of a class system that can figuratively and literally crush them. Yeah. This was a huge addition to the game because of the top-down nature of the original. The sense of scale only realized in iconic shots like Cloud looking up at Shinra HQ, but even then, you don't see the underside of this plate. I really have to commend the environmental designers for addressing this limitation in the original. Good shit. Sorry, I just have to gush about the Sector 5 slums. It has this very welcoming atmosphere with some actual greenery, something that has been lacking in other areas previously visited. There's an orphanage that Aerith helps out at that gives this whimsical and cheery nature, even given the circumstance. The kids also mentioned knowing Biggs and Jesse, which is another nice tie-in with Avalanche. The cherry on top is that they might know Aerith. Obviously, we can't talk about Sector 5 without mentioning Aerith's house. As you approach it, the paths and old rundown machinery become more and more overrun by plant life. Then, a beautiful scene opens up, and well, just take a look.
There you go. That's my house.
It's amazing.
You see, Midgar is devoid of natural life due to Shinra's exploitations of its natural resource, Mako. But it seems wherever Aerith is, she brings new life into the world. Showcased in the opening sequence and the fact that there's a patch of flowers in the church she visits. Aerith probably spends most of her time at her home, so it's only natural that this place is sprawling with lush greenery. You know how I said the main cast looks great? Well, all the other NPCs, not so much. Look, I get it, creating character models is hard. So creating unique ones for each random character that fills the town is a lot of resources that can be diverted to something else, like making Sung's double show. But really, for the same goddamn NPCs within 2 seconds of each other, I don't care about this sort of thing that much, but you can't help but notice the lack of polish. I hope this type of immersion break can be maneuvered around in future installments. Something that will probably be fixed in future ports are the shitty textures I finally noticed towards the end of the game when you're going topside. I really came out on stream and said that they did this intentionally to pay homage to the old 3D rendered background. I kind of relished in the nostalgia that it imparted on me. Boy, was I wrong. The internet was outraged by the low quality textures in my AAA game. A member of the modding community, NecroAlex, has confirmed that there are actually HD textures for the backgrounds, but loading the high-res textures isn't prioritized properly. It just isn't able to work. I'm not an expert in Unreal Engine by any means, but it seems like this can be fixed. Whether it's worth it or not is the issue. I for one am probably in the majority where most of this doesn't matter, so this seems to be a coding oversight and not a hardware limitation. Hopefully it can be remedied in future installments, if not by the company, then by modders themselves. The game still has many high-res textures. I mean, look at Rina's cleavage. Anyway, let's talk about audio. Let's start with the voice acting. I never thought I would say this, but dubs over subs, at least for this game. I played the entire game in dub, as I naturally do for Final Fantasy. I just prefer some things in English, even if it's not intended. I prefer Goku's badass bravado in English. I prefer the Pharaoh's epic deliveries in Yu-Gi-Oh! It's just what I'm used to. I just play Final Fantasy in English. However, I always felt that was a personal preference and never the quote-unquote right way. I think a lot of us here in the States have this idea of what the cast sounds like due to the original's fame. So I feel that Cody Christian is really channeling Cloud and not just cool anime boy. No disrespect to Takahiro Sakurai, he is one of my favorite voice actors in anime, but I think he is just too professional and has too many characters stored in his repertoire to do Cloud the way I want him to. I can't help but see Rohan Kishibe whenever Cloud says, there's just too many anime-isms in the Japanese. Although the directing is fine, they talk like anime characters instead of normal people. Again, this is no shame on the Japanese dub, it's fine. Just the nature of the direction for Japanese voice actors. On the other side, the dub sounds as if it was directed with the real conversation in mind, as opposed to being recorded in isolation. Something the KH3 dub had a huge problem with. What makes the dub so enjoyable to me is that it feels distinctly Final Fantasy VII, and not under the umbrella of typical Japanese media, or anything Western for that matter. It's just refreshing, you know? Everybody sounds exactly how I imagined in my head. Cloud spouts classic one-liners, one being,
Let's dance, asshole.
and
Bring it on.
Barrett is the balls to the walls crazy leader of an eco-terrorist organization, but is able to lower his tone to comfort his daughter and tuck her in safely to bed. Tifa is a pure angel we all know her to be, a strong yet wary female lead. Her delivery is caring and womanly, but seems mature for her age, probably due to her years in the slums. Brianna White, a fresh face in the world of voice acting, brings her A game to realize Aerith's bubbly and sassy attitude. Even when she says,
Shit.
it just feels so right. And just look at her reacting to her voice in the game. She's just super precious. She was just meant to voice Aerith. The addition of voice acting lends itself to engaging more of our senses. While walking from place to place now, the party can have conversations, ultimately adding more charm and witty banter while you walk. No longer just silently walking around indulging in Uematsu's compositions. Although the soundtrack is great, you can honestly start tuning it out as the environmental tracks repeat. The battles always end with you being able to seamlessly continue walking and are accompanied with a victory phrase in lieu of the pose and fanfare.
Would kill for...
They intelligently use these phrases to let us see the nature of Cloud and Barrett's relationship change. Cloud starts off standoffish, brushing off any attempt from Barrett to converse, but by the end of the game they are complimenting each other on their battle prowess and just being a little more bro-y. Also, Tifa keeps mentioning she needs a shower. I think the developers know what they're doing. So yeah, the voice acting's pretty good, but how does the music hold up? Uematsu's original compositions are a masterpiece. There's no denying that. I love it. Everyone loves it. His work on the original is so simple yet so memorable. The original soundtrack is encoded into my DNA, so Masashi Hamauzu and Nobuo Uematsu had a gargantuan task of modernizing it for this game. My first impression tells me that some songs don't translate as well. One being the Mako Reactor. The original had such a haunting and foreboding quality to it that just cannot be matched with the updated instrumentation. It doesn't sound the same without those weird panning blips and bloops. It really is one of those diamond in the rough situations that came from the limitation of the PS1 sound chip that just can't be replicated. The updated orchestration has a lot more sounds that clutter up the memorable melody. I think this can be said about a good number of tracks. The song Hip Hop de Chocobo is a trap remix of the Chocobo theme, complete with slightly out of date 2014 brass stabs, which is almost a guilty pleasure of mine, honestly. It's one of those songs that are so bad that it's good. On the other hand, there's tracks like Those Who Fight Further, which is a multi-section rendition of the iconic Fight On from the original. This version just slaps you in the face with the metal guitar riffs and an epic choir summoning the strength within you to defeat the Airbuster. It's fucking sick. Another track I have to talk about is Smash 'em Rip 'em, which is this drum and bass version of Tifa's theme that is the backdrop for when you play as Team Best Girls tearing through Don Corneo's mansion. It is the perfect theme for this girls' night out scenario that we get to indulge in as the Wall Market chapter crescendos into the confrontation with Don Corneo. As an electronic producer who is regularly digging through remixes of video game soundtracks on SoundCloud, this track was just made for me. I basically listened to it on repeat while writing this script. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Uematsu's original compositions are a masterpiece. Aid of Hamauzu's electronic instrumentation, this dynamic duo was able to deliver a nostalgic experience as well as a fresh and updated soundtrack. Yes, I said some of the songs really can't compare, but my music taste is nebulous, and it's my own personal preference. There's still a plethora of different versions of songs to love, so not much complaint from me in the music department. Put it lightly, the soundtrack slaps. Alright, let's talk about a new character. Let's start with Jessie. Yes, I know you're in the comments to tell me I'm a fraud and that she's in the original, but hear me out. This is somewhere I really think the remake shines. It's in fleshing out characters like Jessie, along with Biggs and Wedge. Avalanche was just these side NPCs who were more like accessories to Barrett. They had a handful of dialogue, and concept art of them only existed in the chibi style. In the original game, I didn't really connect with them because the Midgar portion was less focused on them and was much shorter. They really are new characters here. Avalanche plays a much bigger role, complete with a whole chapter dedicated to them. Jessie and the rest of Avalanche look so great. It's really unexpected because not much of my brain space was occupied by them. But Square Enix thought, why not make Jessie another waifu? And Biggs into literally Charlie Sheen in Tropic Thunder. And I guess Wedge, he could be a walking fat joke. Oh, but he likes cats. By the way, Jessie is a thirsty, cock-obsessed thought for Cloud. She was this sort of flirty girl who messed with bombs and hacked the mainframe. She knew the lay of the land pretty well. She's pretty smart, but now she's been brought to life with this super fun and flirty attitude that I bet nobody saw coming, even if it is laid on a little too thick. If you do well in the bike sequence against Rose, she'll give you a little smooch on the cheek too. This team must really love Jessie Raspberry. Not to mention she has this whole backstory where her real job is being an aspiring actress, which is how she supports her family. Well, that's not the only way she helps them out. It turns out her father works for Shinra and was found unconscious while performing maintenance. He is now bedridden due to Mako poisoning, so obviously Jessie blames Shinra for what happened to her father, and joins Avalanche in an attempt to stop the evil electric company. Square saw the opportunity with Jessie and went ham on it. I'm willing to bet new people to the series will be extremely devastated when she allegedly dies later on in the story. Oh, oops, did you not play the original? Sorry, you simps. Speaking of simps, you already know Johnny worships Tifa's bathwater. In the original, Johnny was just a guy who dated Tifa who ran away from home. You would run into him sometimes, but that's pretty much where his story ended. Here, he still kisses the ground Tifa walks on, but he goes on a whole wall market adventure with Cloud, and I loved it. He just screams, "Saturdays for me and the boys" energy, and all of this was side content, so I got to it on my second run of the game. It was all a pleasant surprise to go with him at my own pace, you know? After I saw the main story. Johnny, although you're a whimpering chat of a man, I like you, bud. Okay, let's talk about a character who actually was newly added to this game finally. Leslie Kyle was a character from FF7 The Kids Are Alright. I get it. He's not new to this series, but I don't give a flying fuck about the novel. I played the original and that's all I know or care about. I really tried to be open-minded about Leslie. I actually really enjoy his design. It looks anime fashion fusion enough to me. His gold accents really fit in with Corneo's Eastern Golden Dragon aesthetic. Anyway, in the earlier chapters, it was just a dude looking out for Cloud and Eris, saying, "Hey man, you don't want to do this, just give it up." Kind of implied that he's a pretty alright guy and doesn't really enjoy working for Lei Dawn. You finally come around with Cloud all dolled up and he essentially goes, "Bro, are you serious?" He figures we have a plan and lets us in. He even drops off your gear from Andrea. This really made me like Leslie. He's a pretty cool guy. There was a lot of subtle nuance to his character that something was going on with him that didn't really fluff up the events of the wall market. Just enough to make you curious, but not enough to make you distracted from the task at hand. Also, so it kind of just quickly dawned on me while I was recording this, how the fuck did Leslie get Tifa's weapons and clothes? She didn't give them to Andrea, and it's not like she came with them. She was just wearing the dress, right? Anyway, and I was happy with that until you have to go with Leslie through the sewers to get some grappling hooks to go topside. Why is this a problem, you might ask? You see, this isn't the first time a chapter was dedicated to the sewers. This time it felt even more dragged out, and you have to fight the Dawn's pet monster, which is a reused boss. To top it all off, the plot has not moved forward at all. The entire chapter is literally about nothing but Leslie's small backstory and how he had a lover who was stolen by the Dawn, and how he wants revenge. And Barrett gives him a good guy pass because of that? How does that even work? The dimension of this chapter happens right after Eris is essentially kidnapped by the Turks, and after the Sector 7 plate drops. This chapter brings the plot to a screeching halt to dedicate a long stretch of gameplay to a character I have no investment in. Whenever you get to fluff in this game, you can't help but wonder, when is X from original going to happen? Because you know it is going to happen. There's nothing wrong with giving me content when it's good. Leslie seems like they just wanted to use his design, so they stuck his story into the plot without realizing how it fits into the larger narrative. Like, bro, I got bigger fish to fry. And he wasn't even a character in the original. So why should I give a shit? And to top it all off, he doesn't even get revenge. He just learns that his lover might be waiting for him to find her. It makes Don Corneo appear as the competent mafia boss he is. How is this a satisfying arc for Leslie at all? We don't even get to see a cool new expansion of Midgard. Did they think we wanted to see the goddamn sewers again? Did I mention the other sewers chapter biggest conflict was that Aerith almost falls into the water and then doesn't? And then Cloud almost falls into the water and then doesn't? God, I fucking hate the sewers. Why couldn't they have made this a side mission? Exactly what they did with Johnny. If they did that, I would have thought this is a pleasant surprise to learn about Leslie, rather than, oh god, can we move on with this? Also, why do you have two first names? I don't have too much to say about Kyrie, but needed to mention, isn't she just a copy-paste of Yuffie? She's like peppy, and she complains, and she's kind of a con artist. I really don't understand what they're going with her. She's generally unobtrusive though, as her story with her badass grandma is told in a side quest, so that makes it fine to me. Oh, how could I forget about my boy? In a world where we're clowning Chads for being too meat-headed and macho, this young strapping lad named Chadley was a breath of fresh air. Sure, he's straight out of Final Fantasy XIII, with his unnaturally colored hair and weird techno monocle that makes him look horribly out of place. But other than that, I really liked him. He added little challenges and rewards for basically playing the game like you were supposed to anyway. Again, all optional stuff. So yeah, he's pretty alright. Definitely hope to see my boy Chadley in future installments. Also, his reaction to Cloud and Address is one of the best moments in the entire game. I hope they don't force us to interact with added characters in the future more than is required. If I enjoy the new characters you added, I want it to be my choice to further my relationship with them. Like I said, I tried to be open-minded with Leslie, but they really pushed their luck with that. Also, what the fuck happened to Roche? That was someone who made such a dramatic impression and never returned at all. Not even to mention, the thing is, I kinda liked him. Say what you want about his dramatization and Advent childrenness, but letting us learn more about Soldier is good. It's one of the more overlooked things in the original. But then he just shows up in an early bike minigame and then he doesn't show up again for the rest of the game. Even for the second bike minigame, it would work as a new sort of rival for Cloud that would expand the world, fitting him perfectly into the narrative. Why didn't they do anything for him? You do get a cool one-on-one duel with him though, so now we can talk about the gameplay. Probably the highlight of the game to me is the battle system. The particle effects tickle my dopamine receptors in a way that makes mashing away at enemies just so satisfying. Being able to switch between characters to make tactical decisions at the drop of a dime makes me feel like a pro gamer strategist. It has just enough easy enemies to hack and slash through, but for tougher enemies you can press X to pull up the command menu, which slows down time and really allows you to carefully make your decisions. It's pretty good most of the time. In a world of Souls-likes, KH2 FMs, and other action games, we have been conditioned to think that the dodge roll is a godsend of iframes that will allow us to stall and figure out any combat encounter. Not here though, the roll is complete and utter dog shit. You don't go that far, so you end up getting hit most of the time. No matter how perfectly you get the timing, there's no iframes, so you need to actually not be in the hitbox of the attacks. It's not a good use of traversal either, because it's generally pretty short. It's fucking useless. You might as well just sprint and run around aimlessly in circles. I remember spending an afternoon fighting Hell House and I just couldn't for the life of me figure out how to dodge these chairs. So I just blocked them instead. And then I had a brain blast. The fact that this is a JRPG, not an action game. In classic turn-based games, you don't dodge attacks, you cast support spells and debuffs to mitigate damage. You have to weigh the pros and cons of taking a turn to heal or dishing out some damage. No matter how well you play, you're gonna take a hit. Time slows down in battles to give the player breathing room to strategically plan their next move. When fighting a boss, I'm thinking, should I target the peripheries to cripple it or the main body to get to the next phase? Should I use an attack now or use an item to recover my MP so I can stagger them later? Remake feels like an action game, it looks like an action game, but I think it really tried to look back to its roots very closely. When you look at FF7 and any turn-based game, it's all an abstraction, one that we've come to find synonymous with the genre. But when you imagine it, they're not actually standing there waiting for their turns. It's just the gaming bit. They've taken what we, and probably them as well, used to imagine and lovingly transformed the turn-based ATB system into a more modern and engaging game like an action game. It allows you to play at your own pace. Want to speed it up? There are shortcuts, which allow you to speed up your gameplay. You can only select 4 for each character, so you're advised to pick carefully and customize as you go. Once you learn to defend and manage resources, the predisposed notions from other games dissolve, allowing Remake's combat system to shine as the action strategy hybrid that Square had always dreamt of creating. As in any game, the hardest difficulty is where the system really shines or the cracks start to show. The biggest change in this challenge is the inability to use items, not just in battle, but at all. This renders them completely useless on your second playthrough, making the vending machine generally unusable except as a place to sell for gil, which you wouldn't need anyway because you don't need to buy items anymore. What the fuck, guys? Those benches that were used to take a load off, yeah, they no longer heal MP either. The only way to keep using magic is to pray to RNGesus to give you an MP restoring Mako shard in one of those boxes that you smash throughout the game. Now you might think this is incredibly unfair and hard because of what I mentioned about always having to take damage, but if you remember, there were 2 mandatory materia that come with Tifa and Aerith called Chakra and Pray respectively. These can heal at no cost to MP and are a necessity in hard mode. Slap these onto Big Boy Barrett with a couple HP ups and remember to keep his lifesaver ability active and Barrett will take care of your team like the big ol' avalanche daddy he is. Using these materia will allow you to conserve MP, which can be used to exploit weaknesses of the enemy or heal with a clutch cure or raise spell. This segues quite nicely into the materia system that for the most part is kept intact. Materia is a nifty little orb of condensed Mako energy. Our characters fit materia into slots on their weapons to perform magic attacks and other cool tricks like this little slide. So it serves as an in-universe narrative element but allows for customization as a battle mechanic. In the endgame challenges, you're allowed to swap out who you use as every party member is present, but you can only use 3 of them. For a while, I went with this take build with Barret, but was hitting a wall in the challenge because the enemy could just team wipe me before I could even heal, and spending ATB on defense buffs seemed pretty inefficient. I then went for a more DPS centric build and swapped out most of my healing materia for more elemental damaging AoE type materia. I also swapped out Barret for Tifa, who has incredible damage. She's probably the best character in the game if you know how to use her properly. She has huge damage and animation cancels. She plays similarly to a fighting game character, which is just fucking sick, but they just put so much work into her singular gameplay alone. With a few changes, I was not only able to beat the challenge, but I was also able to shave off nearly 15 minutes off my time. It was my first foray into the speedrunner mentality, something I've never really played around with until this game, because the systems allowed me to ease myself into it at my own pace. Back on the topic of materia, the customizing and amount of materia is kind of lacking. There are 9 summons in this game, which is nothing to scoff at as the animations are pretty insane. However, 3 of them are locked away as DLC, one being a pre-order bonus, meaning if you didn't want to buy the game early, this content was locked away from you. This is just bad practice. If you didn't opt for the deluxe edition either, there are only 6 summons compared to 16 in the original. There's way less materia in general, which is understandable as this is only a portion of the original. Ultimately, the remake cannot go for the amount of customization of the original due to sheer number of materia being that much lower. However, I don't think they were focusing on letting you choose your own builds for your party. In the original, you could just slap any materia combo onto a character and by the end of it, mostly just became spam strong attack. It becomes a one-size-fits-all type of approach. You can make Cloud your healer and Tifa your magic dealer. It didn't really matter what you did because the materia system allowed for that. Yes, Barret has a gun in the original, but it didn't deal with long-range enemies any differently than the rest of the party. It was just an attack. In this game, Barret is specialized to deal with enemies that Cloud and Tifa can't reach. I would argue that the design philosophy to have each character more specialized is much better at getting you invested in each character. Like, let's say Eris, for example. Truth be told, on my second playthrough of the original, I never used Eris, so her eventual departure from the team did not have the weight that was intended for her more healing focused design. You could say this is a hindsight problem and that I knew going in that she would leave the party, so I opted not to use her, but I was able to get through the game without her. In the remake, however, with the constant party swapping, sometimes not even having Cloud, each encounter feels as if it was designed a lot more intentionally. Each character is specialized now. Cloud can't reach long-range enemies naturally as a sword user, so Barret can now use his gun to shoot them from a distance, but when you switch to his Punisher mode, he can counterattack when guarding, which is used for fighting slippery enemies. Aerith has a buff that places a ward on the ground that allows for a double cast of magic at half of the ATB cost. Pair this with an all materia, and this is a recipe for utter destruction on bunched together mobs. This made Aerith probably my favorite character to build my team around, as I had 3 characters spam 6 Firagas from a safe distance. The nature of choosing a specialized character for the right job allowed me to invest in each character equally, rather than going for the one-size-fits-all approach of the original. Each encounter felt more like a puzzle that you had to solve in the heat of battle given the current party composition, one that was never too unfair, because again, you can take your time and choose your actions carefully. I never felt a boss was unfair because when I died, I at least learned how to deal with something, allowing me to adjust materia and strategy appropriately. I also want to quickly mention that having upgradable weapons is something this series needed for a very long time, because it means that if I wanted to use the Buster Sword for the entire game, I could. It was kind of strange how iconic that sword is in the common consciousness of gamers. However, it is so quickly replaced in reality. You can also learn permanent skills by completing requirements on each weapon, so if you don't want to use one but want the skill, you can go that route too, which is I think a good way to unlock skills, as it's not locked by levels, but by story beat. The philosophy of the battle system is impeccable, however it doesn't come without flaws. In what world did they think it was a good idea to have the default setting of the right stick to be the target switching and not camera movement? In literally every game with a 3D camera, this is the default setting. I went through my entire first playthrough not knowing about this little option that made my controller function normally. And even then, the camera sometimes is just too close to see everything that's happening. This was mainly an issue when fighting airborne enemies. You see, they really emphasized that Barret is the long-range damage dealer, who can deal with enemies that Cloud and Tifa can't. So why do they have to fight airborne enemies when Barret isn't present? They can reach them, but they're generally hard to deal with because Cloud and Tifa will teleport and melee attack them, but they'll just fly away or have a spell up that blasts you away, so you just have to wait for them to come down. I think the idea is that they want you to use magic, but sometimes I just don't have the proper magic equipped at the time. So battling these guys is just really clunky and breaks the pacing of the game for me. Fleeing is an option, but I'd rather just slog through it as it isn't impossible, it's just annoying that I have to leave to readjust. I hope in future titles they either add a jump button that more effectively brings the melee characters to flying enemies, or they just don't give them flying enemies to fight at all. Back on the topic of materia swapping, don't get me wrong, I love menuing as much as the next guy, but the amount of swapping between characters leaves a lot to be desired. The composition of your party is always changing, so sometimes you need to take materia off of characters who aren't playable for the chapter. This is usually fine as it's more of a one-time swap at the beginning of a chapter. However, there's a portion late into the game where you have all 4 playable party members in a single chapter, and they are split into teams of 2. If you don't have extra copies of leveled up materia, the game expects you to swap these materia every time you change teams. They could fix this by adding a number of set loadouts or something like that. They have this option when you change weapons, why don't they just create this for characters? I don't know, this is definitely a design oversight that needs to be fixed, especially with a lot more characters going into the next game. Now, the worst part of the game doesn't even really have to do with the gameplay. It's more of the scripted base changes in every fight. Base changes are nothing new. However, in classic Square Enix fashion, they blew most of their budget on graphics, so they're going to make sure you see these cutscenes. Look, there's nothing wrong with cutscenes, I love reaction commands in Kingdom Hearts, but in this game, when you deal enough damage to a boss, you will be unable to deal any more damage, forcing you to sit through a cutscene. Unfortunately, this occurs a lot when you use a limit break, ending the phase wasting your hard-earned limit gauge before you can finish an attack. When you're trying to beat a boss on repeated attempts, you generally master the earlier phases and quickly get to the phase that you're having trouble with. In this game, however, you are forced to conserve your resources as you just want to barely touch the damage threshold. Then you are forced to sit through the same cutscene you have seen dozens of times just to get to where you were before. It's like this game is punishing you for optimizing your play and exploiting the boss's weaknesses. I'm sure this is particularly annoying to speedrunners who would like to attempt phase skips, which is actually available in the fight against Bahamut in the secret challenge. Simple breaks in the HP bar would signify to the player when a phase change is coming, so they at least know not to dump all their ATB at the end of a phase, wasting all of it. I understand this probably ruins the surprise of when the phases are, but it is just so much more frustrating to waste resources when you're going to learn the damage threshold on repeated attempts anyway. This wouldn't be hard to do because they already exist and show when you get to threshold already. It's just a matter of making them visible at all times. Obviously, the battle system isn't perfect, nothing is, but I truly think this is a step in the right direction. It is quick and action-packed enough to be fun and challenging, but the addition of the tactical mode allows less dexterous players to take their time and play at their own pace. The game is easy to play and fun to master. It also presents puzzle-like challenges in the form of fixed parties that are constantly changing throughout the game. I really like it. Also, just a quick shout out to this section of the game where you just play as Barrett mowing down hella shit. It's cathartic as fuck, and Barrett needs his own game where he goes crazy with the swears. Anyway, I hope they add a Kingdom Hearts style data battle section for all the bosses, because having to play through the entire chapter with crap like arm crane minigame and Cloud walking across shaky plank a million times just to get to the boss is just ridiculous. You would even have to fight another boss just to get to another boss sometimes. I know these slow loading next area sections are because of the PS4 being not powerful enough to load the game, but it just happens so often. I can't wait to play the Final Fantasy VII Remake on PS5 because I really do enjoy the gameplay, but replaying certain sections really hinders my desire to get to those bits that I do enjoy. It should come to no surprise that this isn't a deal breaker by any means, just a complaint with modern games, I guess. Nah, we have to talk about it. You could sleep on the amount of padding this game has. Maybe that's what they were aiming for because the fluff will bore you to tears. They really couldn't come up with better quests than kill 5 rats. I'm sick of this MMO style quest that is so prevalent in modern gaming. You have to repeat these chapters and side quests a total of 3 times to get all the dresses. It's just so much backtracking to obtain this one goddamn trophy, and the game doesn't even tell you which dresses you already have. So you can mess up and get the same one. Not to mention there's whole story chapters that generally add nothing to move the plot along other than they got from point A, they got to point B. The first time we're in the sewers, the climax is Aerith almost falls in, Cloud almost falls in, and then they run from Sahagins that we've been dealing with the entire chapter. Then you go again with Leslie as I described earlier. On the way back to Sector 7 to get to a little firefight, they decide, hey, you know what this conflict needs? What about a fan service chapter of the train graveyard? People really love that place. And you know, it's cool to see this, but in the original, it was like 2 screens. It seems like they want to make this the horror section of the game, but it seems so confused about the tone it wants to go for. They want to use this as a way to surface some trauma for Aerith. but she's the hyper girl with fairy energy, so she's comfortable with them anyway. And then they also want to force this pandering BS in your face. I just don't get it. Also, why is Tifa so afraid of ghosts? I don't know why, but this game goes out of its way to really undermine Tifa. She's constantly being protected by Cloud, which is fine. He's our hero. He should protect his girl. But look at this scene from the original. Tifa's the first one to jump off a goddamn moving train. Here, it's Cloud's idea, and then Barrett is the first to jump off, which is admittedly pretty funny that he has to psych himself up first, but then he's followed by Cloud, who covers Tifa's landing. Was it really worth it to take this badass moment away from Tifa so that we could have fan service? I think they're trying to give Tifa an arc, but you can't have an arc in this game because in the original, it happens way later after Midgar. Crap, we were talking about gameplay, weren't we? Well, at least the minigames are pretty good. Okay, one more thing about Tifa. I hate this fucking climbing monkey bar shit. Like, why doesn't Tifa just literally jump to it like she's been doing the entire game? Well, this pull-up section against Jules is generally hard though, and had me sweating in real life when I finally beat him.
Would kill for a shower.
By the way, there's a story in this game. I'll quickly give an overview because I'm going to be assuming that you have played the original. But there's pretty much not much I could talk about without spoiling. So if you're peacing out, thank you for watching. Here goes. Cloud is a mercenary and ex-soldier who gets constant migraines and visions of a beautiful platinum main man who we call Sephiroth. For money, he is helping his childhood friend Tifa, who is part of an eco-terrorist group called Avalanche, led by Barrett, destroy the Mako reactors built by Shinra, who's essentially draining the planet of its natural resource Mako. On a bombing mission, Cloud is separated from the group by an explosion that leads to him safely landing on a bed of flowers in a church. Aerith agrees to help Cloud get back to Sector 7, where Tifa and Barrett live. On your little escapade, you run into various members of the Turks, who are essentially the special ops teams for Shinra Electric Company. One being the red-hot sexy Reno, and the always prepared with extra sunglasses Rude. They're always trying to get Aerith to come with for some reason. You kick their shit in and carry on with your life. Aerith helps you get back home to the Sector 7 slums. Not before you notice Tifa being taken away to Wall Market. You quickly talk to Tifa, who has a plan to get some info on Don Corneo, who is basically the mafia boss of Wall Market. Cloud ends up going on this strange date with Aerith to save Tifa that includes, but is not limited to, Cloud fighting a house, performing an impromptu dance duet with a perfect god among men, going on a quest with his new homie Johnny for the sauce.
Wait, the sauce.
The sauce?
The sauce. That's it. That's the one. The sauce. It's time, bro. The sauce. Could it be? Oh, the sauce. The sauce. Whoa.
It's just sauce.
And getting dressed in full drag. This all culminates in the raid on Don Corneo's mansion. When the jig is up, Don Corneo spills the beans that Shinra is going to drop the Sector 7 plate onto the slums in an attempt to destroy Avalanche's base of operations. Midgar is in the shape of a pizza and is separated by an upper plate and the lower slums, and is separated by numbered sectors, Sector 7 being one of them. If you destroy the supporting pillar, then the upper plate will fall onto the lower plate, causing obvious destruction. The gang has to make it back to Sector 7 where Barrett and Avalanche are in a firefight against Shinra to stop destruction of the supporting pillar. Cloud climbs the pillar while Aerith goes to 7th Heaven, Tifa's bar, to save Marlene, Barrett's daughter. Cloud, Tifa, and Barrett fight Rude and Reno at the top of the pillar in a last-ditch effort to stop the bomb that will destroy the plate, ultimately fail. Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge seemingly die protecting the pillar against Shinra soldiers. To add insult to injury, Aerith willingly goes with Sung, the leader of the Turks, in exchange for Marlene's safety, who is now with Aerith's mother, Elmira. Cloud knows that Marlene must be with her, so he takes them to Aerith's house. Elmira fills in the gang about Aerith's true identity, revealing that she is a descendant of the Ancients, and that she isn't her real mother. She adopted Aerith when she found Aerith and her late mother, Ilfana, running from the Shinra. Elmira explains that Aerith has a connection to the planet and knows when life returns to the livestream, aka they die. Shinra needs Aerith as she is a clue to finding the promised land, a place with boundless Mako energy to ultimately extract more resources from the planet. The gang promises to get Aerith back and make their way to Shinra HQ, leaving Marlene in the care of Elmira. Easily infiltrate the corporate empire by running up a flight of stairs with the backing of Mayor Domino, who is revealed to be an Avalanche cohort that has been surveilling their arrival, preventing soldiers from acting on it. They free Aerith and a talking doge named Red 13, who is being tested on by Professor Hojo, Shinra's lead of science research. After Cloud passes out after seeing a vision of Sephiroth, Aerith explains that the Ancients are actually called the Cetra, and explains her past and the test that Shinra did on her mother. Since they're there already, Barrett decides it's double whammy time, and it decides to take down President Shinra, ending the company's exploitations of the planet once and for all. Boy, that was a mouthful.
Would kill for a shower.
Up until this point, things seem to be going pretty similarly to the original. You might even be excused to think that they didn't change much, as most of the major events still played out. You go on bombing missions, Cloud meets Aerith at the church, the plate falls on Sector 7, you run up 59 flights of stairs, you know, good old Final Fantasy VII.
Except it's not, because it's not a remake, motherfucker.
The story cap I just made was pretty much the main events of the original, which the remake does a pretty good job of following for the most part. Well, we're finally here. This is your real spoiler warning for the ending. If you haven't finished this game, come back. I'll be here. Don't you worry, child. When the game came out and I discussed it with friends who weren't playing it at launch, I would mention that we can't discuss more without getting into spoilers. They would innocently ask, how can there be spoilers? Isn't it just a remake? Isn't this game over 20 years old? One might be coerced into believing that. I mean, it looks like Final Fantasy VII. It was marketed as the Final Fantasy VII Remake. So what exactly is a remake? Isn't it just a retelling of a story with updated graphics? Well, not exactly. Final Fantasy VII Remake falls into this weird new meta amalgamation of being part remake and part sequel by expanding and updating things that happened originally, with new dialogue, cutscenes, and gameplay, but making adaptations for a modern audience. So the recap doesn't really end there. In the OG, your party follows a trail of blood to President Shinra's office to find that he had been impaled and killed by a long sword already. In the remake, the party follows puddles of mommy juices to find President Shinra hanging for his life off the side of a building. Barrett saves the president and the two have a confrontation. The president thinks he has the upper hand when he pulls a gun on Barrett, although I'm not sure what the hell he was thinking as Barrett has his own gun as an arm. What happens next is the first step into the utter madness that Remake really is. Sephiroth impales Barrett, leaving him for dead while the rest of the party fends off a new version of Genova called Dreamweaver, with the remix of the titular song that just bangs the entire time. They conquer the alien mommy, revealing it to be one of the black-robed men tagged with numbers seen throughout the game. Sephiroth retrieves him and majestically floats away. To speak on the story further, let me remind you of Red 13, the talking lab rat dog we saved from Hojo. He joined the party. Sadly, he isn't playable, but it makes sense since he would only be available for a few chapters, so I understand. He starts pretty adversarial and does not trust us. However, Aeris pets the good boy, softening him up a bit. She calls him a young one, revealing a major character detail not shown until later in the original. She also does a mind transfer jutsu on him because now Red is allowed to just spout off any exposition as the story sees fit. He is able to explain the visions that they are seeing. More on that later. He explains the newly introduced Whispers, the hordes of Dementor ripoffs that have appeared throughout the game, are Arbiters of Fate. Basically, they're timeline janitors, time jannies if you will. They are the force of the planet who attempt to keep Destiny.
Like capital D? Destiny?
Yes, capital D Destiny. There has been tons of time janny activity, some of which include literally breaking Jesse's ankle so that Barrett is forced to ask Cloud for help on the next mission, to whisking away Cloud, preventing him from murking Reno. Those all sound pretty inconsequential, right? How about this?
They literally have the power to bring Barrett back to life after Sephiroth kills him.
They are stating in this moment that they are not here to fuck around, and that they mean business. Red explains that he obtained this knowledge when Aerith reached out to him, giving us a clue that she knows way more than she lets on, in addition to having extra powers. Up until the last couple chapters, for the most part, the major events play out the same. There are some hiccups and changes, but those are adaptations for a modern audience that they warned us about. Nothing too alarming. Most things I was happy to see, some being Mayor Domino being an Avalanche fanboy, and the mission with Jesse. You would be excused for thinking that they didn't really change too much, especially the first couple chapters. But on a second playthrough, with knowledge of the time jannies, it becomes clearer and clearer what they are intended to be. They are the constant gnawing and cries of purist fans who want the remake to be exactly the same. The Whispers are here to make sure the remake plays out exactly as the original does. With that in mind, let's get to the 18th and final chapter, shall we? Destiny's Crossroad. After escaping Shinra HQ, the Whispers have completely surrounded Midgar. They are going bananas in an attempt to prevent Cloud from confronting Sephiroth too early on. They are finally taking matters into their own hands, and they confront the party to put a stop to their plans. You arrive at a door of light, and before the gang passes through, Aeris also tells everyone that Sephiroth has to be stopped, here and now. Again, hinting she has more knowledge than she should at this point in the story. With the vein about to burst out of my forehead, Cloud and the gang go through the light. They defeat 3 named Whispers who have distinct forms from that of the Time Jannies. They also have fighting styles based on the Geos Megma Boys and Advent Children, and an amped up Kingdom Hearts tutorial boss named Whisper Harbinger. Did I mention the 3 Whispers use polymerization to fuse into a Whisper Bahamut? Yeah, I'm not making this shit up. Anyway, to defeat this absolute gauntlet of a 3-on-3 team fight, they all experience a vision. It looks to be the end of the original game, Midgar, the void of life, and Red 13 with what we presume to be his children. In the distant future, no humans in sight. He describes these events to the party, even goes as far to say that this is the bad ending and it must be changed. Probably assumed this is the final boss, the game is finally fucking over. Hallelujah. Or is it? With the Whispers defeated and essentially fan expectations now squashed, the course of Destiny is now free to change without the holy scripture of the original to follow. Open the fanfic floodgates because in a shocking premature twist of fate, we fight Sephiroth here and now. In this moment, my childhood died forever. This battle is an homage to every Sephiroth appearance throughout history. The setting and action scenes are reminiscent of Advent Children. Not to mention he has his fucking wing. And to top it all off, they remake the iconic final battle that takes place in Cloud's mind where the two go mano a mano. I'm not gonna lie, this is all incredibly epic and it was a whole roller coaster of emotions of seeing this pan out in all its HD glory. However, a blaring alarm in my brain is saying this is all wrong, this is too early, and I just can't ignore it. You see, Barrett being killed in the president's office is shocking, but it's not really the problem here. I mean, the Whispers fixed it, right? No big deal. There's a much larger issue at hand with Sephiroth's appearance here. In the original, the president was already killed. Sephiroth nowhere to be found, already a step ahead of us. In the OG, you need to cross a marsh, but if you attempt to do so on foot, you encounter an enemy that the party has no way of dealing with. The solution is to ride across on the back of a chocobo to avoid it. When you get to the other side, you find the same monster already killed. Cloud is able to deduce that it was the work of Sephiroth. He was able to single-handedly defeat an enemy your entire party couldn't begin to deal with. What I'm trying to get at is Sephiroth is not seen until much later in the game. Only breadcrumbs of his power are laid out in front of you to build suspense for your eventual encounter at the end of the game. You don't even see what he looks like until you get to Junon. This is where the remake is most concerning to me. They wanted this epic fight against Sephiroth to top off the remake, but they didn't do any setup to earn any payoff for the player. Put yourself in the place of someone who has never played Final Fantasy VII. Someone who has seen iconic imagery of Sephiroth, but never really knew what he was all about. They know he's got long white hair and an even longer sword. Someone who decided to play the remake because it was marketed as a good starting point. Someone who thought they were going to finally learn about one of, if not the most iconic gaming villain of all time. It's all very exciting for them. They fire the game up and play through the game. Sephiroth shows up towards the beginning of the game to add some mysterious intrigue. Several appearances later, you would think you would learn more about his motivations, or he would at least do something to affect the narrative. Well, the remake doesn't do that, because the game assumes you already know who Sephiroth is. They only show him because they want you to go, hee, I played the original, I know who the fuck this guy is. Everybody already knows who Sephiroth is, so I gotta start throwing my money at the screen? That's not how it fucking works. When a new player fights Sephiroth at the end, they are left with different questions than the writers intended. For me, I'm wondering, why is Sephiroth here so early in the game? What did it mean when he absorbed the Whispers? Is this a different Sephiroth? How does he know the events of the original? What is he referring to when he says, 7 seconds until the end? Why is his shirt on? I have all these questions, but a new person is mostly thinking, who the fuck is this guy? They're probably also thinking, who the fuck is this cat? The treatment of Sephiroth is ultimately where the remake fails for me. It fails to recreate the carefully thought out mystique of its central villain. Final Fantasy VII earned its iconic final battle by properly establishing Sephiroth as an inconceivable threat by thoughtfully weaving its writing with its gameplay. Then through that gameplay, allows us to live out the story of Cloud and overcome that threat. Sephiroth tries to convince Cloud that he is worthless by trying to make him question his own identity. Sephiroth tries to convince Cloud that he was never in Nibelheim and that he was never able to kill him. Then, in the depths of Cloud's consciousness, Tifa learns that Cloud was at Nibelheim like he said he was, and that he did defeat Sephiroth before like he said he did. He was able to rise to the occasion before, by being himself, not even as a soldier first class. He's just one of the helmet-donning foot soldiers that we've been mowing down the entire game. Tifa learns that Cloud did keep the promise he made to her as a child and will continue to protect her. There's a reason why Cloud defeats Sephiroth with Omni Slash, his strongest attack. Even if you haven't unlocked it, it's to symbolize that he had the power deep down inside him to overcome his challenge all along, and breaks through his limit when it really mattered. That's why it's called a limit break. That's why this last battle is so memorable. No matter how much Sephiroth tries to take his identity or a loved one from Cloud, he can stop him by appreciating what he does have and learning to move forward. Here, in this game, it's just epic fight between Cloud and Sephiroth because Cloud and Sephiroth fight each other in Final Fantasy. That's just not how a satisfying conclusion works. They blew their big badass Sephiroth card too early. Who will the final boss of the second game be? Just another Genova or Sephiroth fight? I can't help but feel that anything less than Sephiroth will be less memorable as this fight, but a rematch with the one-winged angel over and over again will become tiresome and predictable. To give the remake credit, yes, Sephiroth does little more than whisper in Cloud's ear. It seems to be heavily focused on the reunion of Sephiroth clones, but none of that really comes to fruition in the game. It doesn't make sense to a new player. This is the problem when the game was written with it being multi-part in mind. What happens with Sephiroth is too reminiscent of an experience I had with KH3. All my friends who had been waiting for this game, they had no idea who Xehanort is. They think Ventus and Roxas are the same person and can't tell the difference between their eyebrows. They're confused as to why, although they've played the first 2 numbered titles, they're not sure what's going on. That's where this remake similarly kind of fails for me. Not as a fan of the original, but as an introduction to someone trying to get into Final Fantasy. If this is your first game in the now series that is Final Fantasy VII, it will not make any sense and it will just completely color your perception of the rest of the series. Those are my thoughts on Sephiroth, but that wasn't even the most shocking part of the ending. Time for the biggest, baddest elephant in the whole goddamn universe. Zack Fair is confirmed in interviews by Nomura himself that he is alive. You did it, Crisis Core fanboys. You saved your boy. Why the lack of enthusiasm, you might ask? To answer this question, we have to talk about the central themes of Final Fantasy VII, one surrounding life, and more importantly, death. Quick history lesson. Hironobu Sakaguchi was inspired by his mother's death during the development of Final Fantasy III. Sakaguchi, Kitase, and Nomura, they wanted to express death in such a way that is, well, real. It happens suddenly, without warning. People die from disease just because. They wanted the deaths to convey the feelings of emptiness, not as an epic grand last stand that they typically saw in films and games at the time. This is exactly what they do with Zack in the original game. Escaping from Hojo's evil tests, Zack and an incapacitated Cloud head for Midgar. Zack has optimistic plans for them to become mercenaries. Shinra had other plans for him though. In a 5-minute optional cutscene, you learn that Zack was unceremoniously gunned down by a few foot soldiers. No final words, and barely even a chance to fight back. He didn't even save Cloud by protecting him. The soldiers just leave him to rot because they think he has no chance of surviving. This is the type of death they wanted to convey. Sure, he's Cloud's friend, but he wasn't able to do anything for him at the end, and that's just real. Death is ugly, and it's not something you plan. Let's talk about one more character. Very quickly, to talk about some gamey things, Aeris is the only character in the original game to seem to have a designated class, as she has a high magic stat, and her limit breaks are beneficial to the party instead of damaging the enemies. This makes her the best candidate to be a white mage, the healer for your party. This makes her near integral to your success. Throughout the game, she also seems to have much more chemistry with Cloud, making his tough guy facade break down, really opening up to her. She's just really cool and you spend a good portion of the game with her, one-on-one, really getting to know her. Again, beautifully weaving the gameplay and writing into your investment. After many adventures with her and the rest of the party, you learn that she is a descendant of the Cetra, who can commune with the planet and use a special white materia called Holy. This is sort of a last-ditch effort to stop Sephiroth from harming the planet. So not only is she super awesome, but she also is super important. Aerith leaves the party to go to the land of the ancients, the Forgotten City. The party chases after her. When you catch up with her, you find her praying. This is when Sephiroth falls from above and brutally murders Aerith in front of everyone. Again, no word said, only a smile on her face acknowledging that death is inevitable. Cloud only being able to describe the physical pain he is feeling to what just happened. He probably had so much left to say to her. The helpless rage you feel as you choke back tears and fight another Genova as Aerith's theme somberly continues to play in lieu of their regular battle theme, changed gaming forever and has stuck with me ever since. Even if you defeat this boss, you can't get Aerith back. She never does return to your party and the menu reflects that. You lose a central pillar of your team, the party loses their last option against Sephiroth, Cloud loses someone he loves. It truly does feel like you lose a friend. You really feel like you've lost everything. So that leads me to wonder, why did Nomura and Kitase change their minds on this? Why did they choose to rob the original story core message of any credibility? Why did they go to such great lengths to set up a story where Zack Fair was saved? Why are they choosing to call the original ending the bad one? To teach the lesson that the future can be changed? What can you learn from that? You can't change the past in real life. Just play the original if you like it so much. No one is taking it away from you. This is a sentiment I've heard countlessly, and you know what? They're right. I can just play the original. The new game doesn't completely devalue the original because it's just a remake. Except that's completely wrong. Things don't exist in a vacuum, especially a remake of a game that is regarded the greatest of all time. Yes, comparison is the death of joy, but it is literally impossible to not compare the two, especially when the remake's narrative depends on the existence of the original. I don't think many people would have as much concern if this was just the same game with updated graphics. Just look at all the people who have such strong positive reactions to Cloud and the dress, but think negatively of the ending. Nobody says the old stuff is bad, and the remake does it even better in some regards. And look, I know this is a stretch, but when games have become an art that is finally respected in thousands of years, and historians look at the original, will they remember the message that Aeris and Zack's death meant? The message that death can happen at any moment, and it's never ever a flashy Hollywood death where you get to have your last words. We lose that feeling of losing Aerith and the impression that she leaves on the world even after death, because now we get to save her in the goddamn remake. When someone new plays the original and they're sad about Zack dying or Aerith dying, someone else is just gonna chime in and say, nah dude, just play the sequel. It's considered the new canon. Think about how fans latch onto things that are canon, whether the ideas are good or bad. That's what I mean when these things don't exist in a vacuum. And you know, this is incredibly infuriating. Although my intense gamer rage is about to make me explode, I feel so guilty for saying this, but I can't help but want to see what they're gonna do. Because no matter what they do with Aerith's fate, it will certainly be an earth-shattering, internet-destroying event. If they keep her alive, if they kill her, if they make her ascend to Goddess Queen Aerith, it's certainly the most anticipated thing from the game now. No matter what it is, it's going to get everyone talking. Still, I can't help but feel as if they are no longer trying to deliver satisfying singular experiences anymore. I now have to wait years to see the conclusion to this story and have no way of making any definitive statements, because when you look at it, this wasn't a completed story. Sure, it was a great game, it was a fun experience, but by no means a satisfying one. I'm not left with the melancholy that I felt at the end of the original. No longer do I feel accomplished, like I'm saying goodbye to my friends at the end of a long journey. I don't get to look back on my entire story and see Cloud overcome all of his shortcomings. We're not left with thoughts on whether humans and the planet can ever truly live in harmony. Now we just wonder, why is Zack alive? Is Aerith going to survive? What I'm really wondering is if the choices to change the destiny of Final Fantasy VII will be meaningful and leave an impression on me, or if going for shock value is the most important thing to them. You really have to be invested in so many pieces of content to be a part of this now. I can't help but feel this might become exhausting. I'm already exhausted overthinking about part 1. I need to lie down. We don't even know how many parts this is going to be now. Look, I don't think Final Fantasy VII Remake is bad. I think it's a lovingly crafted game. It does many things right. The Wall Market chapter was incredibly charming, even more so than the original. The boss battle against Rufus in the original was quick and forgettable, but now it's an epic duel that was one of my favorite moments in the game. Going on a secret mission with the other members of Avalanche really was just a fun time and made me care for characters that were mostly forgettable to me. Hell, I don't even think I knew Jessie was a girl the first time I played. The first entry really was a celebration of the original, and it far exceeded my expectations. Square Enix went above and beyond in recreating this masterpiece, but as always, I am going to stay wary and say that they are going down some railroad tracks into dangerous territory. Look at the company's origins and triumphs and how far they've come. Famously, on their last legs as a company, they created the original Final Fantasy, taking huge risks by leaving their partnership with Nintendo, a juggernaut in the computer gaming market, an unknown foray into 3D and starting the golden era of Final Fantasy, disrupting the Western market with the original Final Fantasy VII, each becoming better than the last. I loved this game, the original, and the remake. I love this series. I love the story of Cloud, Tifa, Aeris, Barrett, and everyone else surrounding Midgar and beyond. I also do actually respect Nomura and everyone working on this project. As you can see, there's a lot of love for this series here. But I think it's fair to look at something you love with the critical lens, so hopefully they can hear the cries of fans to improve it so that it can be great. Yes, they are making changes, but I can't say this enough. They're taking the parts we loved and turning them up to 11. I think that now they clearly intend on making changes. I'm more open-minded about it. It used to be a huge point of controversy of whether or not they were going to change it, and now we have our answers. If they just remade the original, it would just be a celebration of an earlier time. And I would say, hey, that's pretty neat, and might move on with my life. I just hope that moving forward that the original won't be relegated to obscurity, or that the story won't become too segmented across side games and movies and separate consoles that it becomes lost in a sea of content, impossible to navigate, and a shadow of what it used to be.